Hello and welcome to the Unit 5 Section 2 video on scatter plots and trend lines. So in the previous section we talked a little bit about scatter plots and what the data looks like, and if we can tell that if it's a positive or negative correlation, and if we have a weak or strong or moderate correlation. Now let's talk about fitting a line onto some of this data. So by drawing a trend line over a graph of data, you can make predictions. That's what this line does for us. It gives us an idea of values that we don't know. The scatter plot shows a relationship between a man's height and the length of his femur, or his thigh bone. Based on this relationship, we want to predict the length of a man's femur if his height is 160 centimeters. So what we do first is we plot the data and we draw a trend line through the points. Now your line should have about as many points above it as it does below it. It may or may not pass through some of the points, okay? So the trend line has been drawn right here, right through the data. You can see we have a few points on one side, a few points on the other, and it's roughly evenly split. Now, once we have our trend line in place, that's what we're going to focus on. So we go from 160 centimeters on the x-axis, and then we read up to the line and go back to the y-axis, and we find that the femur for a man that's 160 centimeters tall, his femur should be about 41 centimeters in length. So to find an x value, you go right from the y value. So if we were to say we want to find if a man has a femur that's about 42 centimeters, we would follow this back and we would go down to the x-axis and read what the height is. And at this point it would be about 162, because all of these grid lines are going by 2. So 162 would be about how tall he would be. So that's what this line can do for us. It can kind of let us know what kind of prediction we can make based on the data that we are given. Now, is it going to be exact? No, not always, but at least gives us a ballpark value. So let's take a look at an example. So the scatter plot shows a relationship between engine size and city fuel economy for 10 automobiles. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to draw a trend line on the graph. So here's where you're going to want to use a straight edge to achieve this. So using a straight edge, such as a ruler, you're going to take just about as many points on one side as the other, and we are going to draw our trend line. So we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So we could probably draw a trend line about here. Okay. Now again, it's not going to be exact, but it's going to give us at least a ballpark value. Okay. In fact, let's move it up just a little bit. You may have to make some adjustments just to kind of get your trend line settled. But here we are. Here's our trend line for this graph, the one that we've drawn. So based on this trend line, we are going to predict the city fuel economy of an automobile with an engine size of 5 liters. Well, 5 liters is here. So if we follow that up, okay, we're following this up to here. Then we're going to follow the line back to our value. And our value here in this case would be, see, that's 15, 16, 17, 18. So it would be about 16 miles per gallon. Okay. Now we are going to do the same thing with the next one. Okay, so let me get rid of these. and let's take a look at city fuel economy of the automobile with an engine size of 2.8 liters. All right, well, 2.8 liters is going to be about here. So we're going to follow that up to our line. And then we're going to follow the line back to the y-axis. And we're going to read that this is, let's see, 18, 19, about 20. So we have about 20 miles per gallon for this one. So 20 miles per gallon. All right, so now we are given a fuel economy. We want to see what the engine size is. So we want to find out the engine size of an automobile with city fuel economy of 11 miles per gallon. So let's start at 11 miles per gallon, which would be here. And if you follow that over, well, this doesn't really do much for us because our trend line kind of goes off the graph, but let's extrapolate, okay? If this were to continue going on down, it would cross about here, and that would be roughly maybe 8 liters, okay? So we're making a little bit of an estimate here, but that's okay. We're just getting ballpark values. Okay? Finally, for the last one, let's see what we get. So with a fuel economy of 28 miles per gallon, that would be up here. And again, this is too high. We would actually have to go back this way, but our engine size is going to be 0, and you can't have a negative engine size. So here we would have to go ahead and say that our engine size is 0. You cannot have an automobile with a city fuel economy of 28 miles per gallon. At least not in this case. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what to do when the data kind of goes off the graph. We showed it in both directions here. All right, that's it for this section of notes. What we're going to be moving on to next is talking about, we'll talk a little bit about writing an equation for these lines, for these trend lines, which is going to be basically what you've done in the previous unit. And then we'll also talk about correlation coefficient, because we've talked about the positive and negative correlations. We can actually put a number to that, and that's what we're going to be doing next.